Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening to you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome to a Friday night live stream. Reason why we're doing this tonight, unfortunately, I will not be able to do the good morning walk tomorrow morning. I know, big smiles all around. So unfortunately, I can't do that tomorrow because, well, literally, I've got to go play board games and drink beer. So, I'm prioritizing my putting my priorities in order essentially today. So, but I think this is really important anyway to go over with, because I think this answers a lot of the questions that we have been talking about on this channel, probably for at least the last 2 or 3 weeks, going over. For example, what's been the proper fallout electorally of like the sleaze scandals? Are the other things that Boris Johnson has gotten into over the past couple of weeks? We've seen the Christmas party last year has come out. That could very well be damaging. There's very obvious from what we'll be getting into, very obvious that that the coronavirus mismanagement is getting into it. So there is a lot of stuff, to be honest, this evening to be going over with. That is, to be honest, quite important. So it is going to be interesting to see going forward how the Conservative Party reacts. What is their going to be modus operandi? Definitely going forward, because there are, again, some other by-elections coming up as well. Will this be worrying them for them? Because as we said before, this Bexley seat for them should have been an easy win. From all intents and purposes, this should have been like a cakewalk, but it wasn't. And if you remember the video we went over with on this by-election just very, very recently, we said straight away one of the big things that was going to be the takeaway was all the experts were predicting low turnout, and that this would massively eat into the Tory majority that they had to begin with. Now, remember, they had a Tory majority with the last guy of over 30,000. So that to them was very, very safe seat. That is probably like the safest Tory seat you can probably think of in the country. And again, I woke up to this morning of the news. They've just held on. By how much we'll find out in a bit. But they won with a very, very massive reduced majority. So overall, going forward, the continuing scandals, not only the sleaze, but all the other stuff, the mismanagement, especially this winter as well, heavily going to hurt the Tories. And I think, remember, there's a couple of other very crucial by-elections that are coming up as well. And some of those aren't necessarily in safe Tory seats. But as always, with things like this, we'll have to wait and see what happens. We will really have to wait. But there were a lot of people on Starmer's side celebrating this, and I very much agree with the article that we're going to go over on this, because it's definitely worth going over. Because again, election analysis, very good to go over, especially even if it's just a by-election, because these can often be very telling about voting intentions of public. And one of the interesting things is that we'll get into later on is that there are two very key factors here in play. A lot of Tory voters basically just did not go out to vote. In the words that they will be getting into, they were basically demoralized by what the Tories have been going up to. That's very interesting. And then the other thing, of course, is that they now might be worried about Reform UK. Now, will this Reform UK become the new UKIP? For those of you who don't know, Reform UK, essentially what the Brexit party became. So they came in just over the line. So if they are going to be worried about this, that could be very interesting. Could be very, very interesting. So yeah, Malcolm G4H said, posting here. So yeah, we've got. So they just won of about 4,000 votes. That, to be honest, I think was what. Yeah, we'll be getting into the turnout. 34%, 34% for a by-election. Roughly quite good as an aside to point out how low that by-election is, by the way. 34% was roughly the turnout for the last mass local council elections that happened in the UK. So think about that. Roughly around about 30% of people who could vote will turn up and turn out to vote for their local councils. It's not a lot. It's really not a lot. But it's that Reform UK angle that we'll be getting in after we've gone over the votes on this that we want to get into as well, because that will definitely be something to watch, because Reform UK do have some policies that I'm in favour of, such as reforming the House of Lords. I think the House of Lords needs reforming, but we on the left wing cannot allow the right to go and dictate how the House of Lords goes and gets reformed, because we cannot allow under any way, shape or form or even circumstances the right wing to essentially dictate this is how the House of Lords is going to run, because you know full well that they will rig it in a way that will favour them. I've said multiple times before, what needs to happen to the House of Lords needs to be completely abolished and be made a House of Regional Representation. And that can be then turned into a single transferable vote based on proportional representation. Once you've done that, you will then get a second house that is again elected by the people of the UK through a very, very different system. But it will be very, very good, definitely. Even if we don't get, for example, like the House of Commons reform, even if we do not manage to get a House of Commons reform through, which again would be fantastic and would be a change. If we got that through for like the House of Lords and got a second representative chamber, that would still be a massive change in like UK politics. Massive change. So, like I say, well, hello. Pretty Birds here. Good morning to you. Leela Games, good morning to you. No, good morning. Good evening to you. Good morning. Although it is morning for Pretty Birds, so at least we got one person right. But yes, good morning to. Oh, God, I'm still stuck in it. Good evening to everyone. Like I say, for joining us. Like I say, we're going to go over some Bexley by-election stuff and find out what essentially the news really has been. So we're going to go and essentially dive straight into the Bexley vote, find out what happened and what has been sort of the aftermath, not only especially what like the parties are saying, but what especially the voters in that area are saying as well. So as always, please do remember to hit that like and share button. That will help out the stream massively on this. So as always, thank you very much to those people who do that. And yeah, we'll dive straight into the article then. So, like I say, this one we're reading to going through today. Both are from the Guardian today because they've done some apps really corking articles on the Bexley by-election. So, the title is "The Bexley Vote Leaves Both Johnson and Starmer with Work to Do," and Starmer always has I always say that Starmer has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do in this area, but we'll get onto that as well. So, even the most bullish of Labour activists expected the Conservatives to hold the staunch Tory seat of Bexley and Sidcup, but Keir Starmer will be quietly encouraged by the 10.3% swing towards Labour. So that, of course, again, is something worth watching as well. In by-election seats, is there a swing to another party? By how much? And what can we extrapolate from this to maybe think about other seats? If there is a 10% point swing here in this seat, what does this mean for, let's say, something like Peterborough? Peterborough, for the past couple of elections, has been very much a swing seat that has been literally won and lost by a few percentage points. So if Labour are getting a 10% swing here, what could this mean for, let's say, a swing seat like Peterborough at the next election? And also, it means, could this be replicated in that Peterborough seat as well? These are all things that we've got to consider when you're looking at things like this. So this could potentially be signalling, good things for Labour in the future. Could being the word of choice here. As always, you have to be, very careful here. Of course, we don't know, obviously, when the next election is going to be. It could be in 2023, it could be in 2024. We're still not sure. Again, a lot of people have been commenting that Starmer's recent, his own shadow cabinet shuffle has been because he expects there to be an election in 2023, not 2023, 2020, 2023. Yeah. Oh, I'm getting so confused. But never mind. We will always muddle through and get on with it. So, definitely something to bear in mind going forward. Could this swing be replicated in some swing seats? If that is true, then that means that Labour could indeed take a lot of the swing seats. Very possible. But again, could being the optimum word here. So, for all the occasional whispers that an upset could be brewing, given Boris Johnson's recent woes of the sleeve scandal and the internal Tory dissatisfaction, a by-election in the Outer London constituency was never the ideal battleground for Labour. In a seat that has always been held by the Conservatives since its creation in 1983 and originally owned by Edward Heath, the party was defending a near 19,000 majority from the 2019 general election. And while the North Shropshire by-election later this month was prompted by the resignation of Owen Paterson, the former Tory ministers whose breach of the lobbying rules prompted the furore around the Standard, the one at Old Bexley and Sidcup followed the untimely death of James Brokenshire, a very popular and respected local figure. And again, that by-election could be very interesting. There's potential rumours of someone starting a anti-sleaze party around it. Again, if they could win, it would be very interesting. But again, this is the typical thing we have in this country of any third party is going to have massive problems. But in a single seat, based on an anti-sleaze campaign, on like an anti-corruption, cleaning up politics, in a one-horse race in which that seat could very well be, you're not talking about a general election here. This is a by-election. Could maybe well do it. We'll have to see if anything actually comes of that, but I very much doubt it. of course. Alexander. There shall be in time be rumors of things going astray. There's always be a great confusion as to where things really are, and nobody will really know where leave those little things. It's true. Very true. Anyway, where are we? So, as ever with all such result, all wings of the party can pick out lessons they want, and those with Labour are already dissatisfied with Starmer will grumble even after weeks of very poor headlines for Boris Johnson. The Tory candidate still won more than 50% of the vote. Nevertheless, there will be some satisfaction within the Labour leadership after a swing which, if replicated nationally at the general election, would put the party at least closer to government. As we said earlier before, if that can be replicated at a national election, they are right. It could put Labour in a position to win government. But we're definitely going to have to see how this goes forward in other by-elections. There's not any really too much happening, shall we say, red wall wise. However, the red wall Tory MPs, as always, are going to be incredibly annoyed at Boris because they are really starting to, shall we say, become the. I think they will become the thorn in Boris Johnson's side before too long. They were swept into power, into office, based on Boris Johnson's promises for the North, and so far he hasn't delivered. We've had the rail betrayal. The money that has been announced very recently is nowhere near the amount we would have gotten if we were still in the EU, etc., etc. The list continues of yet more Boris Johnson broken promises. So how are they going to go back to their voters next year and say, okay, we want you to vote for us again because we promised you all this, but, we didn't deliver? How does that affect them at the next election? We have to wait and see what happens there. But I think they will be, I think, the first group to revolt. I think, even at last reading of the when the rail plan was being announced in Parliament, you had the latest MP to be announced in the by-election of Hartlepool stood up and said this wasn't on. You've had her stand up in the Sleaze campaign and say, hey, what on earth are you doing? And the Northern MPs, those especially new ones, they are doing everything they can to try and distance themselves from being classed as a corduroyed Tory. So we'll have to see, obviously, how that works out, how that rebranding of them, their attempted rebranding, does turn out in the future, because that could have maybe significant electoral advantages for them. Who knows? We'll have to see. Like I say, it also does come down to how well Starmer puts forward a good manifesto at the next general election. For that, well, that's anyone's guess. That's anyone's guess. But anyway, so perhaps more significantly, of course, is that while the new Conservative MP for the seat, Louis French, won a sizable percentage of the vote, his majority was just under 4,500. And again, very significant. Although the turnout in December by-elections could be expected to be low, Labour strategists were buoyed by the idea that some Tory voters, if not ready to switch sides, are at least going to stay home. There was also some more evidence of the tactical voting in play. With Labour the accepted challenger, the Lib Dem and the Greens, neither of them who devoted significant resources to this by-election, won fewer than 1,500 votes between them. Again, something also that could come up in the next general election. Could we see tactical voting come into play? Proper tactical voting, not like we had the 2019 general election of, we think we're going to have this tactical voting. So, this is how it's going to play out. We could maybe have some proper tactical voting. But That will only come in if, again, and only if we see the leaderships of the parties get behind the ideas of tactical voting. If not, yeah. Nevertheless, could be very interesting if that does indeed happen. So, on the Conservative side of things, of course, feelings might also be very mixed. Supporters of Johnson will use this result as evidence that the Prime Minister is untainted by the opposition attacks of corruption and incompetence. Holding a seat so strongly at a by-election after a government party has been in power for 11 years is certainly an achievement. But Tory canvassers, whose job it was to get out the vote, on Thursday confessed they heard complaints from dissatisfied, shall we say, Conservative supporters, many who criticised Johnson's leadership skills and professionalism. A familiar story related by one Tory councillor who went door knocking in the area went like this. The reports our voters have very weak motivation and are dissatisfied with Boris, but have become borne out in my conversations with residents. But now the votes have all been tallied, it is clear to see the seat was always very unlikely to change hands. So this is the big thing, that Tory voters are now dissatisfied with Boris Johnson. Could this become a thing? Possibly. And I say possibly because if you may remember, back again, pre-start of the year, I was predicting the exit points at which Boris Johnson might decide to essentially pull his parachute and just eject himself out of number 10 as quickly as possible. And for those of you who might remember, I did say one of my predictions was that Boris Johnson might survive up until the next election, but the Tories will get rid of him because they think that he will be more a liability than an asset. If they think in the couple of by-elections that are to come before the next, big, shall we say, general election dust-up, if they think that Boris Johnson is going to be far more of a liability than an asset at a general election, the Conservatives will get rid of him. Or shall we say, Johnson will say, okay, chaps, I'm off. Because Boris won't wait to be pushed. If there's one thing Boris Johnson knows, he knows how to backstab people. We've seen all of this, even in power. So if there's one thing he does know, he knows the art of the backstab, but he also knows when it's time to, shall we say, start looking behind yourself a bit more because, well, people are coming up to you looking to, shall we say, find a place to plant the knife. So it's a good point at that point to maybe turn around. So with that in mind, Boris may intentionally pull the parachute before the general election and say, I'm out. I'm not going to be the Conservative Prime Minister you're voting for. It's going to be one of these guys. And we start looking for the next Tory leader. And as I've said before, I think possible candidates, Liz Truss being probably the most popular candidate among the Conservative, the non-Conservative party. You've got Rishi Sunak, again, will have lots of support, and also potentially Michael Gove. And probably a surprise, well, not surprise really, Priti Patel may also throw her hat in the ring. So I think those four alone are going to be very strong contenders to say who will make their attempt to become the next Conservative leader or / Prime Minister. But needs to say, if that prediction does become borne out, that Boris Johnson has become such a massive turnoff to his own party that they will not even go out to vote for him if he is on the ticket, the Conservatives will get rid of him. Like, no questions. It will probably be a case of, here you go, Mr. Johnson, here is all the here's all the necessary guff that say you're bad, we want you gone, and I think he will probably go. So definitely something to worth watching and see how that bubbles away in the background for the future. Of course, looking at its demographics, the proportion of people over the age of 65, again, the key Conservative demographic, of course, is 19.2, based on the last census data, which was well above the London average of 12%. When it comes to housing, of course, 79% of voters are property owners. Again, another very well represented block of Conservative owners. Again, well above the London average of 48%. That's sort of shocking that 48% of Londoners are homeowners. The rest are not. It just goes to show you the massive problem we actually have when it comes to renting in this country. And of course, the borough of Bexley voted very strongly at Leave for the EU referendum at 63%. But while Johnson is, of course, well known for his promise in 2019 to get Brexit done, voters in Old Bexley and Sidcup do not seem convinced, at least yet, that the government is actually delivering for them in other areas. During the campaign, some brought up the issues such as Johnson's widely panned speech to businesses about leaders and meandering into the Peppa Pig world, and of course, the party held at Number 10 attended by Johnson during the second lockdown, and broad further frustration accompanied by the sense that the PM needed to sharpen up his act. What may not worry some Conservatives, but should bother Labour, is that these voters lamented the lack of an effective opposition. Starmer was said by some observers of the campaign to have been an invisible during this by-election, and the Labour leader may even spent the polling day in Yorkshire. That perhaps is the single clearest message from Thursday's vote. Neither leader can afford to be complacent. And I think that's probably the most prudent language of this. That is easily the most clear takeaway from this by-election. Neither leader can really afford to go to sleep during the next couple of years, because they are going to be really crucial on what they do for the next couple of years. I've said before that if Starmer really wants to make waves, what he should do is release the Labour manifesto early. There's nothing wrong with him doing that, saying, "Hey, this is the Labour manifesto. This is what we're going to push for." And here's the thing: he can have released that manifesto, but before the 2019 election, after pushing for that, doing all the fine tuning, checking all out, tweaking all the bells and whistles and whatnot, before the next, the election, the 6 months where it's announced, he can then go, "Oh, here's the updated manifesto." He could potentially do that, and it would be very, very interesting to do. And I think it would help solve the issue that lots of people continuously say about Starmer, that they do not know what he stands for, that they do not understand what Starmer is. We do not understand what Starmerism even is as a concept. What does it stand for? What does it mean? So that would help massively put him forward. Definitely in the polls, definitely help people for him to understand essentially what on earth is going on. The other thing, however, of course, like I say, we're in halfway through now of our little evening together. Like I say, it's going to be quite short this evening. The other part of our visit tonight is: are the Tories the Tories I'm gonna have a drink in a second. There we go. Are the Tories worried about Reform UK? We have heard a number of times in a couple of recent weeks that old Farage is planning maybe a jaunt back into public politics, probably with Reform UK. And as I've said before, one of the things that Reform UK said they wanted to do, they didn't exactly say how they were going to do it, was that they wanted to reform the House of Lords. And I agree. The House of Lords is in desperate need of reform. And I would love to see Labour take that on as bringing it forward for good reforms for this country. And I think even if you can't sort of get like proportional representation maybe backed as the big policy change from Labour, maybe getting them to back it as the way that the House of Lords is voted in, and making it, as we said at the beginning, a regional representative body. So you, again, have all the UK split into regions, and then you've got X MPs from X number of representatives from here in this constituency, blah, 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 blah. And again, you do it by proportional representation. A second house elected that way would have a massive impact on politics. But again, we're just going to have to see, of course, if that does it. And I would love to see the PR campaign pick up on that as well, that, hey, the House of Lords does in desperate need of a good sorting out as well. Oh, thank you very much, Cathology. Any idea what might become of Jacob Rees-Mogg being investigated for cheap loans at the Downing Street and the Downing Street Christmas party? We'll have to wait and see. I know he's being investigated by Catherine Stone, aka Boris Johnson's number one enemy in all this, in this idea. We'll have to wait and see what happens. That investigation at the moment is ongoing. We'll have to see what becomes of it, and what the investigative body says. Ultimately, he will probably be punished. Will there be pressure on him to resign? Don't know. If anything, it will probably once again reignite the sleaze scandal all over again when it comes out. And of course, the Downing Street Christmas party, I don't know if he was actually there or not, but again, that's more an issue really for Boris Johnson, as he is sort of the Prime Minister, meant to be sort of technically labelling the rules and sorting all that out. Of course, yeah, that was a good point, actually. That was probably one of the highlights of the pandemic, that Farage in 2020 was planning to go and join the speaker circuit. And the speaker circuit, oh my word, if you ever get on that speaker circuit, you can make like hundreds of millions of pounds, or should we say dollars in this case, like after doing something. Like most American presidents, except Trump, you'll notice, go on this speaker circuit afterwards. Obama did it, Clinton did it, Bush did it, but not Trump, interestingly enough, because I think, Trump did not have the best words when it came down to it. But of course, Farage had been invited, and 2020 was meant to be his big victory lap. 2020 was meant to be his big victory lap for the whole Brexit thing. And that speaker circuit was meant to be the big highlight of it. He'd rake in the money. But of course, the pandemic kicked in and basically put that out of commission completely. And of course, he's now missed his window of opportunity, because the speaker circuit is very, okay, what did you do this month? Not what did you do last month type of thing. So he's missed that opportunity completely, and he's missed out on making, again, a boatload of cash, which, to be honest, is quite a good thing. So that is true. But the one thing I would have loved to see, I would have loved to have seen, is what speech was Farage actually going to do? Like, if it's ever like gets put on YouTube or something like that, it may be a good stream to like do a reaction to. That would be quite a good reaction to be honest, because it would be interesting to see, you know, his whole victory thing, and you sort of like maybe debunking it live, you know, what he's saying, because he's not going to tell the truth about he's not going to tell the truth about the referendum at all. So that is the initial reaction, of course, to the Bexley by-election. So we're now going to go jump in to the other article that I wanted to cover this evening as well, which is this one. Again, from The Guardian. So the Tories might have won Bexley, but they're worried about the rise of Reform. Again, Reform UK, of course, is the big follow-up success of the rebranding of the Brexit Party. Again, the split off, of course, from UKIP. How worried really are they about this rise? And will it actually have an effect? Will this be the new UKIP? And what will they actually want to reform? Because I said at the beginning, they want to reform the House of Lords. They haven't exactly said how they want to do it. And I've said before, the left needs to be paying very close attention to this, because what if, you know, like Nigel Farage managed to do, not only get the referendum pushed into consciousness, but again managed to succeed to pushing the Tory party even further right, and we've seen the effects on that. What are the effects on that going to be? You know, we can't allow us on the left to allow the like Reform UK to set the pace on what the reform of House of Lords should look like. We can't allow them to dictate the pace of that. We can't allow them to be the ones to say, this is the change we want to have. Because we may get into a situation, just like we had in 2012, of where we actually had a chance to change our voting system. Admittedly, it wasn't a very good change to the voting system. The alternative vote one, which again wouldn't have made a big change to the way we vote, slightly. I think some people have said that Jeremy Corbyn might have been prime minister through it, but overall, it wasn't like a proper change in the voting system. It was like changing to the first past the post version, essentially, of like a proportional representative system. It wasn't very good, and again, this satisfied a lot of people. So a lot of people didn't really turn out for that vote. So we can't allow that to happen. We can't allow Reform maybe to get a referendum on changing the House of Lords out there, but the reforms being so bad that it doesn't really create the type of true reformation in British politics that we would want from changing the House of Lords. It, shall we say, is just merely changing the curtains, really, when the whole window needs changing. Essentially, that's essentially what I worry they would do. And like I said before, we cannot allow them to dictate what that is. So we'll jump into this article now, because again, I think it's worth going through. So let's see what they've got to say on this. So the Conservative hold in the Bexley and Sidcup by-election has both sides claiming victory. Senior Tories point out the fact that their party held the seat with more than 50% of the vote share as proof of success. Labour-told politicians claim that the 10-point swing towards the opposition is evidence that the party is back in business. The truth is far more complicated than either side's spin, though, as we've just gone through on that. Ahead of the vote triggered by the death of the former Cabinet Minister, James Brokenshire, the ministers were confident that they would hold the constituency, which has very long been a safe seat. However, the fact that the majority was reduced from 19,000 to less than 5,000 and a voter turnout at 34% means that it isn't a win that will lead to a party atmosphere at the Conservative campaign headquarters. Instead, there are lessons to draw from it for future votes. The poor turnout, the lowest at a by-election since 2018, hasn't surprised those sent to the seat to campaign. While members of the government were confident in the win, there was very much a sense that there was a lack of enthusiasm amongst the core base. People will come out for us, but they will do so begrudgingly, said one senior Tory ahead of the vote, with weeks of negative stories from the Owen Paterson sleaze row to the Boris Johnson rambling speech to the CIB meant that even the Tories' grassroots is feeling deflated. What points to potential issues for the Tories in the future is who benefited. For now, the fact the Labour vote share went up by 7.4 points, while Reform UK won 6.6%, means that the opposition vote was split. Again, we see this all the time. yeah, that's what we need to do. Yeah, someone needs to convince Sargon to go join Reform UK, and that will just destroy the party before the next election. So if that can happen, if Reform UK does bring up the ranks, and we do see that this again was as a split, that again is not pulling from Labour but pulling from the Conservatives, this could indeed cause the UKIP phenomenon all over again, except it will be the Reform phenomenon. Because Reform UK has access to all those same advantages that UKIP had, as well as their disadvantages that most third parties here in the UK are subject to. It's just that they have the backing of a lot of millionaires and billionaires and a lot of that money that they can use to go and campaign in those seats, whereas most of the new parties just don't have that luxury. Again, take the Green Party, for example. They've been a new party for at least beyond 10 years at this point, but they still only have one MP, while never being able to replicate the success that they've had at local council elections into a national election success. Hence why, to this day, they've never had more than one MP. So, that was, of course, Reform's leader, Richard Trice, only got at least 6.6%, is a reminder of how lucky the Tories are that Nigel Farage has retired to the comfort of the broadcasting studios, and it's not hard to imagine the trouble he would have caused in a seat such as after a month the government has just had. As the Channel crossings gain more coverage, one of the biggest worries in the Conservative HQ is about the next election is that the party will emerge that will outflank them on the right. While Labour has recently pulled level with the Tories in the polls, the government advisors are somewhat sceptical of the idea that Keir Starmer can win much ground over immigration, given Labour's own approach isn't exactly clear-cut. However, were a Farage-style party to hammer the party on this, there could be a world where the Tories lose a chunk of their vote to another right-wing party, which would allow Labour to become the largest party without making much progress from where it is now. In the short term, of course, this by-election result will increase the Tory nerves over the next one in North Shropshire later this month. That vote was already viewed as a far trickier one of the two, even though the Conservatives again have a majority of more than 20,000 in the rural seat. Again, it will be interesting to see how that by-election turns out. Despite this, of course, being Owen Paterson's old seat, sleaze is not dominating. Tories and Liberal Democrats campaigning both say that it doesn't come much up. Instead, Wad Lim Dem says that, quote, Peppa Pig is more the regular complaint on the doorstep as a reference to Johnson's CBI speech. But what worries the Tories is there we go. But what worries the Tories is that the seat is so safe that they don't have any data about where their votes are. And of course, the distance from London makes it very hard to get cabinet ministers there for profile-raising visits. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are on the offensive, pouring resources into the seat and claiming it as neck and neck, with one senior Lib Dem betting on a win. So in this seat, again, Owen Paterson's old seat, it does look like the Lib Dems are going to try and recreate what they did in Cheshire and Amersham, where, again, meant to be a safe Tory seat, but Lib Dems came in and snatched it away. Could they replicate that same success they had there in Owen Paterson's seat? It could be very likely. But again, we'll have to wait for that, because again, that will be happening very soon as well. Needless to say, this will probably not be a very good Christmas present for the Tories if the Lib Dems do indeed end up winning Owen Paterson's old seat. But of course, if they do manage to win it, it's of course that same old question: by how much is their majority cut down from? And again, can Labour replicate that swing? If you start to see a constant swing of people voting Labour in these seats, as we said earlier, swing seats like in not Preston, Peterborough could be won by Labour. And if that starts to happen in those swing seats, what also could happen, for example, as a lot of people are potentially saying, that the red wall might collapse on the Tories. What happens then? Could we see a proper collapse of the Tory party at the next general election? Again, one scenario to play out. How likely it is, at this point, I can't exactly say, but it's a potential scenario nevertheless. So the Tory loss in North Shropshire would, of course, still be a surprise, but a by-election 9 days before Christmas will demoralise a Tory base that is not a recipe for festive cheer. If the Tories don't hold it, it won't be the season of goodwill for Boris Johnson among Tory MPs. The Prime Minister cannot afford the fortnight ahead of the vote to be dominated by any more stories about parties in number 10 or contradictory advice about just how normal this Christmas will be. The government will try to get back on foot next week with announcements on crime and, of course, the Nationality and Borders Bill. Johnson needs this to go well if he is to ensure that there is no unpleasant Christmas surprise for him and his party. So we will have to see about how that goes. We'll be very paying close attention to how that goes. But they are right to be worried. If Reform UK, which, again, if there is a party Nigel Farage is going to come back to, it will be Reform UK. Now, has he generally retired from frontline politics? That is the serious question, because Farage has made this announcement before that he's retiring from politics only to just swan back in. And we've seen him very recently announce that, again, he had been approached about running again by apparently big donors behind former UKIP. Big donors approached him, and Conservative donors as well, to run in another party. And if they get outflanked on the right, that could be a result in some very significant losses for them. Very significant losses. Because UKIP always took and damage to the Tories, not in their heartlands, but it was mostly their swing seats, where it was literally the case of every vote counts, and they need those votes, but they could never do it because they always knew that UKIP would come along and take between about 10 to 12% of the votes. Not away from Labour, but away from them. So it will be very, very interesting to see how Reform UK is going to develop, especially in the coming years. Remember, potential next general election is either going to be in 2023 or 2024. How is Richard Trice going to develop the Reform Party? What exactly is it he's going to be pushing for? What exactly is it the reforms is he looking for? And how hard is he going to push against the Tories? Because we always knew that the UKIP manifesto was literally a copy and paste version of the Conservative manifesto, just with some more hard right notes, shall we say, scribbled in the margins. We're going to have to wait and see, of course, how that develops. But nonetheless, something that you probably need to be paying attention to if you're going to follow UK politics. How are Reform UK going to grow? How are they going to adapt? What is their strategy going to be going towards the potential next general election? Now, I hope, to be honest, that the Lib Dems do win Owen Paterson's old seat. That would make Boris Johnson very, very uncomfortable around Christmas. It's just a matter if the Lib Dems can replicate what they did in Chesham and Amersham. And can they learn from what they did in Chesham and Amersham into that by-election? Because if they can, then they might win that seat. That might very well be an upset. And if you've got a senior Lib Dem source basically saying he's put a bet on Lib Dems winning it, they might be very well be there, because that was the exact same talking points, what they were saying about the Chesham and Amersham by-election. Stranger things have happened in politics. Stranger things have happened in politics. The Lib Dems could legitimately win that by-election. And that would definitely give Boris Johnson a very, very unhappy Christmas and a very, very, very large upset number of Conservative MPs. So, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. Like I say, this was replacing the Good Morning Walk that we would normally have tomorrow, because unfortunately, well, I'm sorting out my priorities tomorrow. I'm off to play some board games and then drink. So that's my plan for tomorrow, and it all kicks off very early in the morning. So unfortunately, I don't have time to go and do the Good Morning Walk. Hence, I thought we'd do this instead. So I do hope you've enjoyed it today. Like I say, it was just a quickie, and I think the by-election is definitely worth going over, because it does have some interesting thoughts and plans potentially to go ahead to potentially not other by-elections that, again, we will pay attention to, but also potentially next general election. Like I say, we'll all have to, again, wait and see. But again, this is definitely information that you need to have, should we say, stored away in your back pockets to look at just in case, of course. So, as always, thank you everyone for watching. Do actually go out a fantastic weekend. As I always say, if you can't be safe, be sensible. Like I say, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. And of course, we'll see you all next time.